Hi everyone, my name is Haley Anderson, and today I'm going to be giving a lesson about my learning theory, which is experiential learning. So the theoretical framework and the theorist that I'm going to be talking about today is Theorist David Kolb, and so he talks a lot about the transformation of experience. So whenever you have a tangible, like active learning experience, and you can process that and then translate that into a teaching method for others. So that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit today, and I've got a couple of resources and activities for y'all to engage in with me as well. So just to begin, I want to talk a little bit about the grounding for the theory and what we mean by an experiential learning model. So as I kind of talked about, really what that process is Kolb describes it, is really getting in tune with and unpacking your experiences as you engage with learning, making meaning of it, and then being able to transfer that and translate it to others. So it's very much a transformative process for the learner as well as the teacher. So it's kind of cool because what we're going to experience today is you go from your experience as a learner, and then the process by which you become a teacher in that. So I'm really excited to share this with you all today. So there are 4 stages in Kolb's model. So the first is concrete experience. This is where you really can think and reflect on what is that active piece and what you've learned. Maybe this was, an art project or a science lab, or like even just something as simple as learning how to ride a bike. What was some time where you had like physically or like had some sort of tactile engagement with your learning process. And even if it's not necessarily tactile, even verbalizing and processing in a way where it simulates and actively engages with the material rather than just like reading and comprehending and regurgitating. When have you actually processed something? The second stage of Kolb's model talks about reflective observation. And so this is when the learning is happening and the process is happening. So what are those thoughts and the feelings and the actions that have accompanied that learning process? Really making meaning of that on a deeper level. The third phase or stage, of Kolb's theory is abstract conceptualization. So this is kind of where that turn happens from learner to teacher. So as you're going through and you've reflected on your learning experience, how are you taking that observed behavior and kind of making your own theory out of what you've experienced and transforming that into a learning experience for others? That brings us to the fourth and final model, the fourth stage of the model, which is active experimentation. So at this stage, you've conceptualized your action and developed a plan for testing that theory that you've created based on your lived experience. So at this stage, you can independently practice your learning theory, and hopefully what we can get to today is teaching that experience to others. So I do have an activity for you all, and in the portal I've posted a couple different resource guides which we'll use today to kind of practice and conceptualize this theory and put some of your experiences into that model. So to begin, I want you to take a moment to kind of anchor yourself and pinpoint an event of active learning for you. So, maybe this was the first time you facilitated a class. Maybe this was, your first time to cook a turkey in the spirit of Thanksgiving. Something that, again, you were actively processing new material. So take a moment and just kind of like get that in your mind to use as the framework for this activity. So what we're going to do in that next stage of the process, which is that reflective observation, is I'm going to have you look at this learning story map. So this is on the portal, and if you don't print it out, that's completely fine. Just use this as like a framework if you take notes somewhere else, to help you kind of understand this four-step process of Kolb's theory. So first at the top we have that anchoring event. Consider that time where you learned something by doing, and just jot that down in that space or in your own notes, and kind of think about, what was that hands-on activity or simulation that you had engaged in. The next step of this is the learning observation. So on this second section, jot down a few notes. So we have thoughts and internal narrative. What was your dialogue with yourself about this learning process? What were some of the questions you had, or some of the challenges you might have faced in that learning process? What were your feelings or responses? Did you get frustrated? Was it difficult? How did you, again, process what you were doing and how you were learning? And then the actions and physical process, if it is, some of that mechanical going through the motions, trying to actively engage in what you're doing. What were some of the steps that you took, especially if you think about it in terms of a science experiment, you follow specific steps to get that outcome. So jot some of those things down there. And the last part of this story map, as you've observed your learning, you kind of thought and reflected on it. And then this last piece is learning and action. So how did this experience inform your understanding and processing of the topic or material? Did this process, and as you actively had that learning experience, did that help you understand it? Were there gaps in your knowledge? So discuss that and just kind of reflect on that below. Okay, so once you've had a few minutes to process your story map and complete that, we're going to then go on to the third and fourth stage of Kolb's model, and that's conceptualization and then experimentation. So you've got your story map, you've made meaning of your experience, and hopefully been able to kind of observe your behaviors and get a good grasp and understanding of what it was that you did. And now we're going to transform that into how you could teach that experience to others. So the second resource I've shared with y'all is the learning roadmap. So with this, I want you to take that anchoring event, and up here just give a short introduction. Now that you've done that process, what is it that you are going to teach folks about your learning experience? So just give that brief introduction, and then for this middle part, create some action steps. This is where, this is your learning theory. You experienced this. You have become the master of whatever this content is in some way, and you know how to do it. So write down some action steps and instructions if you were to either repeat this yourself or if you're to teach it to others. So go ahead and take a few minutes then to write that down. This is where you're doing that abstract conceptualization of your own personal theory and your experiential learning. And this last piece, this is really just kind of that call to action, if you will, for y'all, and that independent practice piece that we're all trying to capture with our lessons is, what's your implementation plan? So you've just processed, you've identified a learning moment for yourself, you've processed it, you've reflected on it, you've outlined action steps for others. So now in this last piece, how will you then implement that? And whether that's, going through this roadmap and just talking it through with a partner or a friend or another classmate, that would be a great way to practice your teaching. Or maybe it's something you want to facilitate. If it was cooking a turkey, maybe you teach someone how to cook a turkey based on your theory of how to do that. Whatever it may be, whatever that event was for you, I hope that you take an opportunity to either practice teaching that and your own facilitation skills and style based on that process that you just went through, or even just chatting it through with yourself or with others to kind of practice your voice in that and putting your own personal theory to use. So thank you all for your time, and please let me know if you have any questions.